Welcome to Mature Matters. I'm your host, Cindy Gray. My guest today is Ruth Ann Carter. Hi, Ruth Ann.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm well, thank you.
Good, good. Ruth Ann lives in Farmington Hills, and she's joining us today to tell us about memoir writing. Ruth Ann, I've done a little bit of research into memoirs, just a little bit, and I found it interesting that the word memoir comes from the French for the word to remember or to commemorate even. And I found it interesting too because it tells us that it keeps something alive and that to memorize is to learn by heart. And I felt that memoirs are expressions of a person's life from their heart, whether joyful, sorrowful, in between. What can you tell me about memoirs?
Well, that statement that they are from the heart must have been known by Natalie Goldberg, the woman who wrote this book, because her technique of writing practice is designed to do just that.
Okay, to pull information from a person's heart?
Yes, to enable the woman, the man, even the child, to get to the essence, what is really in their heart. That's the entire purpose of her technique. And that is what I use when I teach memoir writing.
All right. You've referred to, in our discussions in the past, to Ms. Goldberg. I've got your copy of her book right here called Writing Down the Bones by Natalie Goldberg. And she seems to have been a tremendous influence on your life. Can you tell me about a little bit about her technique, or what's different perhaps about her technique?
I will. When her book hit the scene, I think it was in 1986, it was a huge success, a big bestseller, and it has remained so. In 1994, she taught a seminar in New York City that my son attended, and along with 850 people. That's how well known she was and how successful the technique is, really. He is using it in writing that he does today in his work. And well, can I tell you how I got started with it in Farmington Hills?
Please.
I, for years, was a Metro Detroit area court reporter. I started in Wayne County Circuit Court. 10 years later, went to federal court, the United States District Court in downtown Detroit, and then spent my an equal amount of time freelancing.
Okay.
And I married and moved to a farm in northern Michigan. I married a man who was a breeder, a nationally known breeder of Tennessee walking horses, which were the breed I rode. I did long distance trail riding, and he decided to retire, and we moved to my farm in northern Michigan. And then he died suddenly. And living in northern Michigan in the cold winter, a friend of mine who wanted to write cooking books wanted to go to Natalie Goldberg's seminar in Minneapolis.
Okay.
So we got on the plane. The seminar was held at the Zen Meditation Center in Minneapolis. And it was a 5-day course, and Natalie Goldberg appeared and said that in her book there was a writing technique she called it writing practice, and she was going to teach it to us. But at the start of each writing practice, we had to do 10 minutes of meditation.
All right.
I had meditated for years before, and I was delighted at that. And then she told us how we would write. She would give us a word or two, and we were to write for 20 minutes without ever stopping.
Just anything that came out of your heart.
That's right. Just put your pen down and start. Do not stop.
Did she give you trigger words?
When she finished telling us that we should do this way of writing.
Okay.
She said, keep your hand moving. Do not stop. Do not go back for any reason. Don't cross out. Don't worry about your spelling, your punctuation, your grammar.
Don't clean house.
No. Don't worry about your margins. Don't worry about any of that. Write what comes from your thoughts.
Okay.
And she said that it will free you from the editor in yourself that says, no, you shouldn't do this.
The inner judge.
Yes.
It's often referred to.
She called it your inner editor.
Okay.
And she said, forget it. This technique will let you walk away from your inner editor.
I see on this list here, it also says lose control.
Yes.
How refreshing to be told to lose control.
Yes, yes. She was very much like that.
Okay.
She was very much like what she wrote in this book. And this is not a deadly, serious book. She talks about how to liberate yourself. And in her title, Writing Down the Bones, which is what she is talking about, the subtitle is Freeing the Writer Within.
What do you think she means by that title? The bones. What bones?
The essence of what you want.
The core, like the marrow?
What you want whoever you're writing for, and it could be yourself. She points out in the book that writers write for themselves more than for others.
All right.
And so if you are writing down the bones, you will recognize that you've come to the bones, the real essence of what you want to say.
All right.
And it is all enhanced and enabled better through these writing practices.
Okay.
At the end of the 20 minutes where we were not to stop, and I remember that the first topic she gave us to write was, I don't like.
And then you finished that
20
sentence.
minutes, and then we
Go from
stopped, and she said, now write, I like.
Okay.
And after 20 minutes of that, she said, now you're sitting at tables of 8 or 10, I can't remember exactly. Read to each other. And every once in a while, she had a microphone on the stage, she would invite somebody who wanted to come up and read what they had written. There were many topics. We would do 2 or 3 and stop and read to each other.
That would be quite revealing, I would think.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's very interesting. We had a young man at our table who was in the advanced stages of AIDS, and he wrote about it and told us.
Okay.
And everybody was so kind to each other about whether they wanted to read or not. If it got to something you really didn't want to tell anybody else, you were free. You didn't have to. You know, she made it so nice
And
in all
comfortable,
ways.
sounds like, yeah.
And it works because after this seminar, when I have had time from court reporting to volunteer, I have taught it.
Okay.
Her technique, and I tell everyone it's her technique. I have taught it to 6th graders in a rural school near my horse farm.
Okay.
I've taught it to, when I volunteered at the Farmington Library, Farmington Hills, really, on 12 Mile Road, the main library, I was interviewed by the library director and children's librarian, Laura Scott. And I brought my resume along because I tend to forget some nice things. And, and after they read it, they asked me if I would be willing to do senior outreach. And I said yes.
Okay.
So I began teaching memoir writing at the Baptist Manor on
Okay.
13 Mile and Orchard Lake Road to a group of about, I think there were 7 seniors. And it was an absolutely wonderful experience. When I explained this technique, they pitched right in.
Probably opened up a tremendous form of expression for them.
Yes, they were so pleased with what they had done. Now, some of them found it hard to write for 15 or 20 minutes.
Okay.
And Natalie Goldberg says some writers do it start at 20 minutes and work up to an hour, all following this technique.
Right. It's kind of like weightlifting for the heart.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so I said, I tell you what, that I could see them showing that their hands were hurting.
Right.
I
Also,
said,
they're
"Well."
not used to that too. There's a lot of physical involvement.
Oh yes, and most of them showed signs of arthritis. There was a woman in that class who was 99 and was an outstanding writer.
Okay.
There were 2 women in the class in their late 80s who, besides memoirs, they were writing novels.
Oh, okay.
And they still are today.
Now, do you think that this technique can help guide writing in other genres, other capacities?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I will tell you that when I taught the 6th grade in that school, one of Natalie Goldberg's assignments was to look straight ahead of you and write without stopping, using this technique, what you see directly in front of you. And if I were to do it now, you are directly in front of me. I would write about the color of your hair, that you're wearing earrings, and maybe the color of your lipstick, because I like color, and your jewelry.
You would describe the colors, essences,
Yes.
textures.
And in this class of youngsters who did not go to sophisticated city schools,
Okay.
one boy, when it was time to read, had chosen the wall plug in front of him,
Interesting.
where you would plug something electric into the wall.
Right.
And he described it, its color, what it was made out of, and the black plastic that you put it in, and what you could put in there. And later, and the kids, they were very nicely listening. The teacher told me later that he had never written a word
No kidding.
in the whole time
that
she'd had
really-
him in the class.
That really opened him up.
And he was obviously enjoying himself because he read it.
Yeah.
And this happens all the time with this. She's right. Her writing practice does free the writer within.
And everyone can write. Even if they can't write physically, they could also dictate it into an audio recorder. I'm
They
thinking.
can. And then with seniors, they need somebody to type it for them.
Right.
Or they give the tape to their family
Yeah.
as a memoir on tape.
Okay. Now, it's funny you mention that because not too long ago, a friend of the family, she's my daughter's age, early 30s or so, and she was telling me about how her grandmother was starting to get quite elderly and beginning to fail in certain capacities, and she was very upset about that, and she was really getting quite dramatic about what she's going to do someday when her grandma's gone, that she couldn't go on, and she was being quite dramatic. And I said, what about, rather than spending your energy thinking about what you may or may not do someday when grandma's gone, why don't you interview your grandmother? Interview her with all the technology we have today. You can do it audio, video, both. Interview her and have her share with you her life story. And a light went on for this young lady, and she said, I'm going to do that. She said, I'm going to get grandma's life story on video, on audio, and that way all the grandkids and so forth, great-grandkids and down the line will always have this. And it would be like her memoir, but in that design.
The methods today of recording and preserving have developed all that.
Right.
Where in probably the 80s and early 90s they weren't available.
Right. We were
a
using
tape recorder
cassettes.
was.
Yeah.
Yes, a
yeah.
tape recorder was.
Right.
But I think too, with a grandmother like that, interviewing her, so much of what I took from this was that it was loving to write. So you were writing your own, you know. But the grandmother needed that help.
Yes. And if you're just joining us, by the way, this is Ruth Ann Carter, and we're here today on Mature Matters. We're talking about memoir writing and basically taking the memories of our hearts and placing them on paper or whatever method that you can do, and using that as a form of catharsis. Would that be the word? A form of healing?
Well, now you're, in my opinion, traveling into love of writing and what you write for.
Okay.
Why each person wants to write.
Do they want to write because they have to write? It has to
most,
come out?
Most of my experience is that they just want to do it.
Okay.
And they very often, with seniors, such as at the Baptist Manor, they want to leave something for their family.
Aha, they want to be remembered.
And they also will say they just love to write. I mean, they, at age 90-something, to sit down and be happy to write shows a love of writing as well as wanting. See, that's what Natalie Goldberg says. You don't write for anyone but yourself, really, really.
Okay.
And so if you love to write and you're writing for yourself, you will remember what of your family is important. And if you leave that behind for them, it seems to fit.
Yeah, yeah. That's very interesting.
She says, I have two little quotes from Natalie Goldberg that I just love.
Okay, share those, please.
In the book's introduction, she says, "A friend once told me, trust in love and it will take you where you need to go. I want to add, trust in what you love. Continue to do it, and it will take you where you need to go." And I think that applies to what you just asked. And then she goes on to say that from 1978 to 1984, she studied formally with a Zen master at that meditation center I was at, who said to her, "Why do you come to meditation? Why don't you make writing your practice? If you go deep enough in writing, it will take you every place. It will take you every place."
Okay.
This book is about writing. It is also about using writing as your practice, as a way to help you penetrate your life and become sane.
Wow.
What is said here about writing can be applied to running, painting, anything you love and have chosen to work with in your life. One neat truth about writing cannot answer it all. There are many truths. To do writing practice means to deal ultimately with your whole life.
Okay. So writing as a form of meditation. Meditation as a form of writing.
And in the process, getting to memoirs through that.
Okay.
And through you should enjoy your writing practice too, because if you love to write, letting go of your editor and keeping your pen moving,
Right.
will produce those wonderful memoirs for your family. So that's why I chose to teach it.
Okay.
And they're very happy with it. I do sub occasionally. There's a memoir class at the Baptist Manor. There's one at the main library on 12 Mile Road in Farmington Hills.
Okay.
And I have subbed at that one. And I thought that this was very interesting. One day, two young ladies in their, I think, early 30s, they came to the class at the library that I was subbing, and they asked if they could audit it. They were social workers from the Jewish Family Services.
Okay.
And they had heard about it, and they wondered if it would be useful to them in their work with seniors who are alone and who they provide mentors or companions to.
Okay.
So they sat in the class and listened, and I gave the class a writing assignment. I said, write about the word myself. Write for 15 minutes without stopping. And I reviewed the technique.
Okay.
And when it came time to read back, I said, well, you're sitting here, you have to read too.
To the two ladies. Yeah.
Yes, to the two social workers.
Okay.
Well, they were writers. And what they wrote about themselves was wonderful. And a while later, I received a call from one of them. Would I come and teach the technique to the volunteers who work with these lonely seniors?
Okay.
I presumed they were lonely because they did one-on-one work with them.
Okay.
So on a cold, rainy night, in the pitch dark, I drove to the Jewish Family Services on Maple, and I think Drake, and there were 30 volunteers sitting there on this huge conference table, and many of them were seniors. And they all looked tired, and oh no, am I going to have to
do something? Yeah,
they looked very tired, so I did my introduction, and then I said, I'm going to ask you to write about what your two social workers did. And they put their heads down and started writing.
And the magic began.
Yes, I saw them pick up energy. I saw them, they didn't want to stop at the end of 15 minutes.
That's a good sign.
They all wanted to read.
Wow.
And they loved it.
Well, that's
and
wonderful.
So I pointed out to them that if they're on one-on-one with the senior who they're visiting, they could read to each other, which is sort of what
the exchange
yes.
back and forth. Well, that is a very wonderful story, and I appreciate all your sharings today. And again, this is Miss Ruth Ann Carter, and I'm Cindy Gray, and this is Mature Matters. And we're speaking today about memoirs, and I hope that you can join me again, because I think we have a lot more ground to cover.
I would be happy to.
Good. Thank you for viewing.